Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are going to Bhagavad Gita. Today we are on chapter 13. So we are going to conclude chapter 13 starting from verse 27. And then if we have time, we are going to go through chapter 14. That's the plan. We're going to start with the English reading of these verses from 27 to the end by David. I think I will also read the Sri Aurobindo's translation. So we'll have two English translations. And then Yogeshwar is going to comment on it. Folks, this chapter 13 is incredibly deep. So please take your time, formulate your questions. After we're done, you're welcome to ask any question about either this material or anything in chapter 13. All right. So David, if you could go ahead and read from 27 to the end, please.
Okay, chapter 13, beginning verse 27. O Arjuna, whatever living entity, animate or inanimate, comes into being, know they are produced by the interaction between the field of activities and the knower of the field of activities. Anyone who perceives the ultimate consciousness residing equally in all living entities everywhere as the imperishable within the perishable, such a one actually perceives. By seeing the ultimate consciousness equally everywhere and partially situated, one does not degrade the embodied self by the self, therefore reaching the supreme goal. Anyone who perceives in this way that activities in all respects are being performed only by the material energy, such a one perceives perfectly the embodied self as the non-doer. When one actually perceives the expansion and diversity of all life forms as situated in the unity of material nature, thereafter, at that time, the ultimate truth is attained. The ultimate consciousness is beginningless, immutable, devoid of any material quality, O Arjuna. Although situated within the body, it never does anything, nor is it influenced. As all-pervading space is never implicated due to being subtle, similarly, the ultimate consciousness, being all-pervading, situated in the body, is never implicated. O Arjuna, just as the sun illuminates the entire universe, similarly, the ultimate consciousness and the individual consciousness illuminates the entire field of activity of the physical body. Those who by realization of knowledge can fathom the distinction between the body, the individual consciousness, and the ultimate consciousness, and the liberation of the living entities from the material energy, they achieve the supreme.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I'm going to go ahead and read Sri Aurobindo's translation, and then we'll go to Yogeshwar. Whatever being, moving or unmoving, is born, know thou, O best of Bharatas, that it is from the union between the field and the knower of the field. Seated equally in all beings, the Supreme Lord, unperishing within the perishing, he who thus sees, he sees. Perceiving the equal Lord as the spiritual inhabitant in all forces, in all things, and in all beings, he does not injure himself by casting his being into the hands of desire and passions. And thus he attains to the supreme status. He who sees that all action is verily done by Prakriti, and that the self is the inactive witness, he sees. When he perceives the diversified existence of beings abiding in the one eternal being and spreading forth from it then he attains to Brahman. Because it is without origin and eternal, not limited by the qualities. The imperishable Supreme Self, though seated in the body, O Kaunteya, does not act, nor is affected. As the all-pervading ether is not affected by reason of its subtlety, so seated everywhere in the body, the self is not affected. As the one sun illuminates the entire earth, so the Lord of the field illuminates the entire field. They who with the eye of knowledge perceive this difference between the field and the knower of the field, and the liberation of beings from Prakriti, they attain to the Supreme. Yogeshwar?
Yavat sanjayate kinchit sattvam sthavar jangamam kshetra kshetrajna sanyogat tadvidhi bharatarshabha. Whatever we are seeing, be it moving or unmoving, whatever is created is from that interaction between the knower and the known. So the kshetra, which is the known, which is the field in which everything happens, in the field in which all the action happens, and the kshetragya, who knows everything about the field. There is that subtle interaction between them that brings up all creation. What I would like to put ahead here is there's this shloka in Sankhya Karika that defines how this interaction happens. What the example they give there is a type of ayaskanta mani. Well, would not have that right now, but surely we have a mirror. So it's like a mirror. For example, whatever is put in front of a mirror, the mirror doesn't have a color of its own, but it takes up the color of whatever is in front of it. So let's say the mirror itself is the kshetragya, is the one who knows, but then it is stained by whatever is in front of it. So there's that sort of interaction between them. The field is vast, but the mirror is only that much as it is. Now, in a way, we could want to know the color of the mirror, but until we remove everything in front of the mirror, we can't know the color of the mirror, because it will always reflect whatever is in front of the mirror. Everything that is known in the mirror is because of that subtle interaction between it. It just takes up the color of whatever is in front of it. And that is how everything else is produced. Like whatever is created is between the interaction of this. For example, if we could say how the waves of the ocean are, everything is created. Like the waves are created in the ocean. It is subtle in a way that, yes, the ocean is there and the waves are part of the ocean. How the waves are created, even though they are part of the ocean, certainly they are also different from the ocean. You cannot say that I have seen the ocean by only seeing the waves. But since the waves are also part of the ocean, seeing the waves means also seeing the ocean. It's a two-way. And that interaction always is. There's no way you can remove that interaction. And that, since there's no way of removing that interaction, because that interaction will remain always, that means creation will always remain. There's no time where kshetra, as in 19, Krishna said that there's no time Prakriti or Purush was not there. From the beginning, they were there. And for eternity, they will remain. The same way, that interaction between them will always remain. It's that interaction of the knower is there, the kshetragya, the known is there, the kshetra, and that interaction between them, which is knowledge, will always remain. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashyatsva vinashyantam yah pashyati sapashyati. There is that which doesn't change. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram. However big or small the wave is, there is that part that doesn't change, meaning it is part of the ocean. It has water in it. That doesn't change. The same is for any form, however long it may be or however short it may be. It may be bent a bit, but the function is always there. And if you can see the function within each and every form, then you'll be able to know the constant. Once you know the constant, you realize that vinashyatsva vinashyantam. However much every form can be destroyed, the function can never be destroyed. When you're able to see that, however much all the waves can be destroyed, like there will be a wave rising and it will be destroyed. It will just dissolve within the water. It will fade away. However many waves arise, they will always fade into the water back. They will collapse into the water. But if you can see the constant within the wave, then yah pashyati sapashyati. Person who can see the constant really sees. Meaning that if you cannot see the constant and you're only looking at the differences in the waves, then you're not truly seeing. What you're doing is just on the brim, just on the top. You're just looking at these small differences of the waves, one being large, another one being just small behind it. And yes, in a way, we cannot see the constant. Why? Because the waves affect our daily lives. Things around us, the forms, they affect our daily lives. It is what matters for our survival. It is what is our normal instinct. If we can change the forms, we can change the way we live. Outside, we can have more money, we can have more wealth. That's fine. And it does matter. It's not that it doesn't matter. The waves do matter, because you'll not see any ocean without a wave. They do matter. But there is this, that if you're not seeing the constant yet within the forms, then do you really know the forms if you don't know the constant? Do you really know the waves if you do not know the ocean? That's the question. Because you're only looking at the action of the waves rather than knowing the waves for what they are. And Krishna is saying this is true for everything. You may think you know the function, the form very well, or you may think you know the wave very well. But until you know the constant within each and every wave, you don't know the wave completely, fully. You only know the action of the wave, or you know the way it affects you in your life, but you do not know what it is for real. Samam pashyan hi sarvatra samavasthitamishwaram na hinastyatmanatmanam tato yati param gatim. There is that which does not fade away, even though all the waves fade away at one point in time. If you can look at that samam pashyan hi sarvatra, sarvatra meaning in each and every wave, samavasthitamishwaram. If you can look at that ocean that is there within each and every wave, Krishna here is saying, na hinastyatmanatmanam tato yati param gatim. We know Krishna knows that Atman and Brahman are always a constant and they're eternal. They never die. Still, Krishna here is saying that a person who sees the constant, which is the function within each and every form, does not kill himself. And the words here used are Atman. Na hinasti Atmana Atmanam. He does not kill using himself. Yeah, he does not kill himself. Normally that can never happen. Krishna knows that. You cannot kill yourself, even though normally we say, yes, you can commit suicide, but you have not killed yourself. What you're doing is just killing the body, but the Atman is always there, and it will just continue to be eternal. What Krishna here is meaning, true death is not committing suicide. True death is moving towards the peripheral more, leaving the center. That is true death. When you do not know yourself, that is true death. When you do not know Brahman, that is true death. You're killing yourself bit by bit, moment by moment, if you're moving away from yourself, if you're moving away from the knowledge of the true self, if you're moving away from the center towards the peripheral, that is death. This is a total overhaul of the term death. You'll see that Krishna has said that in verse 12, that a person who knows the Jnana, meaning a person who knows the Brahman, after knowing, he becomes eternal. Yaj jnatva amrutam ashnute. So he becomes eternal after knowing this. He does not know this. He who does not know this is killing himself day by day. So what is it? What means becoming eternal? What does it mean not to kill yourself? Is to move towards the center. Prakrityaiva cha karmani kriyamana sarvashah Yah pashyati tathatmanam akartaram sapashyati. This is something that needs a lot of explanation here, because normally it will coincide or conflict with so many other options we have. Prakrutyeva cha karmani kriyamanani sarvasha. One should know that he is always different from Prakriti. That we know. Kshetra and Kshetragya are different. Prakriti and Purusha are different. All the activity is happening in the Prakriti. All the activity is happening within the Kshetra. And it is the Prakriti who is doing all the activity. Not only that it is happening in the Prakriti, but it is the Prakriti who is doing all the activity that is going around. Yah pashyati tathatmanam akartaram sapashyati. Stand separate from the Prakriti and know that all the activity is happening in the Prakriti and by the Prakriti. I am not doing anything. I am just standing separate from the Prakriti. One example to give in that is, normally we think we are controlling our emotions, but what happens is there is a flow of gunas, three of the qualities of Prakriti: Raja, Tama, and Sattva. What happens is we are flowing in this flow. We're flowing in this river, which is of the Prakriti. Wherever it takes us, we are going. Our habits are part of the Prakriti. We normally think that we are away from our habits, but think about it. What happens is all the activity we do is in accord with the habits that we have. All the thoughts that we have, this is more subtle here. All the thoughts that we have are in accordance to all the previous concepts that we have made. So the previous concepts are part of the Prakriti. Every thought that is coming out right now, out of the concepts, is part of the gunas. It's part of the action of the Prakriti. It's not different from that. The same could be said for all maybe day in, day out activities, because we're in a constant circle. And how it's put in the Sankhyakarika is like, for example, just imagine you're riding a bicycle and it is in full speed, yes, down the hill. Now, the only thing that is in your control is the bicycle, whereby partially it's not even in your control. It's like it's in full speed. If you put brakes instantly, it will just like, it will be out of your control. You'll fall down. Yes. If you try to change the direction, you'll also fall down. You'll trip over. In all ways, Prakriti is going to do its work. There's no way to evade that. The only thing is that that person will feel, yes, I'm in control. But what control does he have? That's the question. He's the one who's riding the bicycle. But just think about it. What control does he have? The speed is controlling, and the direction, none of it is in his control. And one thing I would like to put ahead here is, yes, Prakriti is controlling. Know that. and then be separate from that. Become akarta. Just become like the seer of all the thoughts. Become the seer of all the actions. When you can see all the actions are just happening as they're supposed to happen within the Prakriti, then you'll see that you are always akarta. You're not the one who is being involved in the nitty-gritties of the Prakriti, because you're always on this side of the glass. You're not the glass, and you're not on the other side of the glass. So you're always akarta. You're always the constant who is there. And that constant is that which is supposed to be put attention upon. He is the one upon which dhyan is supposed to be done. Concentration should be to that direction, not in the direction of the Prakriti. Because when you're always concentrating on the direction of the Prakriti, what happens? You feel that the gunas are part of you. You feel that Prakriti is part of you. There's no difference at this moment. I am my mind, and I do not have a different identity from my mind. If I have a thought, then there's no way I have a different identity from my thought. Even though I may know through words that I am Atman, but even that's a thought. That's not an identity. I may know that Brahman exists eternally. That's still a thought. It's still a concept. That's not a constant. So you're missing the constant. However many concepts we may have made about Atman, who is constant, Brahman, who is constant, but we still miss the constant. We still miss who we are for sure. We're still delving into the thoughts and the intellect, becoming so one with it that we do not have any identity separate from that. Yada bhuta prithak bhavam ekasthamanupashyati tata eva cha vistaram brahma sampadyate tada. When you know that all the creations, living or non-living, you can see them within one. The first concept was seeing the oneness within each and every form, seeing the function within each and every form. Now, this concept is about seeing each and every form within the function. Can you see that? When you see that each and every form is the function itself, and when you look at the function, you're looking at each and every form at the same time. There's no difference. When you look at the ocean, when you become one with the ocean, when you allow the drop to fall into the ocean and become one with the ocean, when you're one with the ocean, can you see that each and every wave is just part of the ocean from the perspective of the ocean? When you look at the ocean, you can look at all the waves all at once. There's no difference here. Tata eva cha vistaram brahma sampadyate tad. That is when you realize that Brahma is there. And not only Brahman is there, Brahman is Vyapta. There's no place that the function doesn't exist. Even the space between the waves is filled with Brahma. That is looking at Brahman. That is looking at even Prakriti. And looking at Prakriti as part of Brahman, not separate from Brahman. Anaditvan nirgunatvat paramatma yamavyayah sharirasthopi kaunteya nakaroti nalipyate. Now, what is that Brahman that we're talking about? So first thing is Anadi. There's no beginning and there's no end. Whether it is time or it is space, in both concepts, there is no beginning and there is no end. So Anadi should be looked at from the perspective of both concepts. Not only one about time. We're so used to Anadi and putting it with time only, leaving alone the aspect of space. Because why I'm saying this is normally time and space, yes, would look at them together, but even in Sanskrit, there are different cases in Sanskrit, and the seventh case, it's called the seventh vibhakti in Sanskrit. It means both time and space. It doesn't mean one. Like when I say yatra, which is in the seventh case, it means both time, like at what time, and it also means at which place. So when we say anadi, in Sanskrit itself, it means both. Not only in Western philosophy or Western science, but in Sanskrit itself, it means both. So we should look at the perspective of both. Nirgunatvat. Nirguna, meaning that Brahma is void of all the three gunas that you can think about in the Prakriti. The Prakriti has its gunas and all the actions are happening there. But there's no action in Brahma, there's no action in Atman, and it is Nirguna. It's like that clear slate. It is not white, it is not black, and it is not red. It is just as it is. No colors are stained on it. Paramatma ayam avyayaha. That is Paramatma. And for that reason is avyayaha. Avyaya meaning if we have a piece of ice here, it will slowly, gradually, it will just fade away. It will become water. Now, that is vyaya. That meaning slowly by slowly, it changes its state. And then another example of avyaya, meaning you have a pot and then you destroy it. At one time, it destroys. It gets destroyed. So that is also vyaya. And Purusha doesn't change in any context. Whether it is demolishing slowly or demolishing at once altogether. None of them pertain to Purusha. All that is part of Prakriti only, not Purusha. Sharirasthopi kaunteya na karoti na lipyate. Don't go look for Paramatma outside. Don't go look for Paramatma in the heavens. Don't go look for Paramatma somewhere that will only your concepts can take you. Because what will happen is we have to stay in the present. What you're doing when you're projecting that, oh, Paramatma is in heaven, then you're projecting the future within your mind. You're not staying in the present. When you're projecting the future in your mind, it means that you're not going to be able to live the present as it is fully. You're always going to want to go into the future. When the future comes now, you'll say future again. It's like a regress, continuous. You're thinking about the future, that I'll get a better view of what life is in the future, or I'll have all the bliss in future. When the future arrives, you'll also regress. You'll take it into the future again. Yeah? Constantly. What you're not doing is living now, living in the present as it's supposed to be. And when you're living in the present, you're in the body. And Paramatma is here and now, not in the future or in the heavens. Sharirasthopi kaunteya na karoti na lipyate. Even though you are in the body, you are not doing anything. And for the reason that you're not doing anything, you're not also stained. Because whatever is doing is what gets stained. For example, if I am doing an action, I'll have to suffer the fruit of the action because I did the action. When the doing of the action fades away, then even the fruit of the action, like eating the fruit of the action, that eating will also go away. That becoming stained will also go away. It is a twofold, and it is like, it's not two distinct things, but it is two sides of the same coin. If you accept one, you accept the other. There's no accepting one only. And normally what we want to do is accept the fruits and not do the action. That doesn't happen. If you want the fruits, you have to do the action. If you leave the action here and now, you also leave the fruits as well at the same time. It's not about leaving the fruits in the future. It's about living the action and the fruits here and now, just now. Yatha sarvagatam sokshmyad akasham nopalipyate sarvatra vasthito dehe tathatma nopalipyate. Now Arjun would have a question here. Give me an example. Like, how can it be that something is in Prakriti, like Purusha is always in Prakriti? Because we've already seen Sharira Sthopi Kaunteya. Yeah? We've seen that stays in the Sharira, stays with the Prakriti. How can something stay with Prakriti and not get stained? It's like saying that we should walk with white clothes on in a coal factory, and then we expect that our clothes don't get stained. Is it possible? That's what Arjuna is going to ask now. Like, really, can that happen? That's the question in Arjun's mind. And Krishna is saying, why not? Like, take another example. Yatha sarvagatam sokshmyad akasham nopalipyate. Akasha, meaning space, is everywhere. There is no place where space is not. Even within each and every solid object, because it's easy to conceptualize space within air, like the molecules are so apart. But even within, like each and every solid object, there is space within. For example, the distance between each and every atom within, there is a distance, and that distance is there. That space between each and every atom is there. There's no atom that exactly like combines with another and is just constantly, two of them are together. That doesn't happen. Each and every atom has its own presence, and there's a space in between. However solid the object can be, the atoms will always have the space in between. So that space that is there, whether you call it a liquid, a solid, or a gas, the space is always there in between. And that space, whatever action happens within the Prakriti, that space is never stained. It's always there. And why is it never stained? Because it is sukshma, it is subtle. it is not as prominent as others. Now that subtleness is what gives it the ability not to become stained. In the same way, the Atman is in the body, is in the Sharira, and Sarvatra in the Sharira. There's no place where you can say, oh, Atman is not here. Like there's no consciousness here. You can't say that. Even in your feet, like it's away from where your consciousness could be. But even in your feet, when you get pricked, or you feel it. So consciousness is there as well. There's no place in your body consciousness is not there. Still, the Atman is not stained at all. Yatha prakasha yatyeka kritsnam lokamimam ravihi kshetram kshetri tatha kritsnam prakashayati bharata. There is only one sun needed to light up the whole earth. Yes. In the same way, there is only one consciousness needed to light up the whole body. Like normally, if at night, it's night time, and we'll feel like, oh, we want to bring so much light. However many fox lights we have, but then what happens? Even behind the fox light, you'll have darkness. So darkness is always there. But now look at when the sun rises, and it just brings light everywhere at once. There's no place light is not. Whether it is in front of the sun or behind the sun, light is everywhere. In the same way, everything is lightened up. Only one consciousness is needed. And the way I'm saying one, it may feel like, oh, there's one consciousness here and then the other consciousness there, but it's all one. It's Advaita, meaning it's not that it is one. It's not numbered one. Because when you number it one, it's like saying there is one sun. Rather, you'll not say that. You'll say the sun. You'll not say a sun, but you'll say the sun. So when you're numbering it, you're putting a possibility of number two to come. But when you say the sun, it's enough. You don't need to count it. In the same way, it's Advaita. There's no need to count it. If you count it one, then you're bringing the possibility of counting another. Kshetra kshetrajna yorevam antaram jnana chakshusha bhuta prakriti moksham cha ye viduryanti te param. If you know the subtle difference between the Purusha and the Prakriti, between the Kshetra and the Kshetrajna, in this way, it is subtle, but if you know the subtle differences, what will you know it with? You'll know it with that sight, which is knowledge. Bhuta Prakriti Moksham cha ye vidur yanti te para. If you know, because what is moksha? Moksha meaning you have to be unchained from something. You have to be relieved from something. And until you feel like I have to be relieved from something, you have to know the difference between what I am, what that is from which I want to be relieved, and where I have to go after being relieved. And then Krishna here is saying, Bhuta Prakriti Moksham cha ye vidur yanti te para. Certainly, yeah, we know that there is a difference between all of them. Kshetra, Kshetrajna, and the link between them. But then, when the realization happens, the realization is, yes, they're different, but they're also one at the same time. However much different they may be. Because as Krishna has mentioned before, however much different the forms may be, if you can look at the function, then you'll see the oneness within all the forms. And if you can look at the function really, you'll also look at all the forms at once, at the same time. And this Krishna is saying that Ye vidur yanti te param. If you know this, then you go beyond.
Thank you, Yogeshwar. All right, folks. So firstly, go ahead and ask any questions that you have. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to ask a question. So that's the first step. And then I'm going to ask you what you have got, how you understand this chapter. Okay, I want to spend time on this because this is really the deepest kind of metaphysical idea here. So go ahead and type exclamation mark first for your questions. You can also make brief comments. So we're going to start with Joe. Joe, go ahead.
So the question I have is, you're kind of distinguishing between things that change and things that don't change, or perishable and imperishable, right? So that's, you have these two things. And then I'm thinking about this in terms of things that are perishable are things that are on the periphery. Is that the proper way to think about it? And things that are in the center are things that are imperishable. So the idea that, well, let me just see, is that proper way of thinking about it?
Go ahead, Yogeshwar.
Yes, things at the peripheral are going to perish one time or the other. That's right.
Okay. So, all right, then, yeah. So then I'm understanding, okay, the nature of change and why it's so important to be able to distinguish these things, these forms, and understand the functions, and because the function's actually moving towards the center itself, correct? Is that a bit? I just want to make sure I'm getting my head around this.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'll just add one thing. What Gita is saying, that the unchanging thing is one. There are not things that are unchanging. The many are changing. So the Purusha is like a universal principle which permeates everything. So the eternal is something that permeates everything. So that's the only thing I would add. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark if you have any questions. If you don't have questions, then I want to ask you what you got from this chapter. Try to be brief. I want to understand what you have gotten from this chapter. Let's go with that. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you have. You know what? Let me do one thing. I have three points, three questions that I wanted to ask Yogeshwar. So I'll start with that. So one thing, one formulation. See, I'm trying to relate what is being said here to other things that we have studied. So one thing I see is the universal principle, like universal principle that permeates everything. So you're saying, yes, things that are shaped by the universal principle will keep changing. They will come into being, they will go away. But through all of that, the universal principle remains the same. So that's one kind of a thing. The second concept in kind of Western thinking, which seems analogous to me, but I want to put that forth. Aristotle has a concept of unmoved mover. So it's something that is moving everything, but it's itself not moving. So any thoughts, Yogeshwar, about either thinking of the Purusha's relationship between Purusha and universal principle or eternal principle, Any thoughts?
Yes. So in a way, yes. So the thing that we talked about, the Prakriti and the Purusha, everything is moving in the Prakriti, and the Purusha is not moving, meaning that constant, and that is the only constant. Everything else, whatever you can count, and the many, is always moving and is always changing that way. But then it is the, now we have known how the Prakriti is doing everything. Yeah? Prakriti cha karmani kriyamanani sarvasha. Now, what we have to know certainly here is, like when we were riding the bike, like the example that I gave, the Purusha, yeah, is the one who, I'm not saying that Purusha moves in the same way as in the example of the bike, but this is just an example. Maybe it doesn't fit fully. But the Purusha interacts with the Prakriti. Without that interaction, nothing would happen in the Prakriti. Prakriti will just stay still as it is. It wouldn't have any movements within itself. So it's like putting the first pedal within the bike. Now what happens is Purusha pedaled the bike, yes. But then what happened is, now when the bike is going downhill, he does not have the control. Whose control is it? And what I mean by not having control, it means like, look at this example. If you are the real controller, do you control all the thoughts that come into your mind right now? Or do the thoughts just come and then you say, aha, this is a thought? Huh?
Yeah.
So that is Prakriti doing its work. What we are doing with Prakriti is just the interaction. Like Krishna said in 26, Kshetra Kshetrajna Sanyogat. So that's the interaction is only what we have to do. Just interact with Prakriti. You don't need to think. Just interact with Prakriti and thoughts will come. Interact with Prakriti and actions will happen. So what you have to know is, which will be clearer in chapter 14, all this, because the gunas are talked about. And then the last question that Arjuna is asking in 14 is about how to stay away from the Prakriti. And staying away from the Prakriti doesn't mean secluding yourself from society or going somewhere away. It means staying in the society, however, staying unstained within the Prakriti. You interact with it, but all the movements are within Prakriti, not within you, separating yourself.
Wonderful. Next, I want to ask you about what you said about the concept of death. And I want to relate it to another example. Could you recap what you said about death as being identified with Prakriti? Go ahead.
Yes. So what we normally know as death, what is death? Dying, meaning who dies? It is I who dies. Now, what dies at the time of death? Like when we conceptualize what death is. When I'm dying, what dies? The body dies, the mind dies, yeah? Everything of Prakriti, whatever can change, is going to die. And that is only what can die. Yes. What cannot die will not die. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, identifying yourself with what can die, moving more towards the peripheral, meaning that death comes to you, moving more towards the center, moving towards what cannot die, identifying yourself with the constant, means that you are not dying. And then another way, the way I said it before was that, yes, killing yourself is this. Moving towards the peripheral is the action of killing yourself at that time, not only when death is going to come, but at that time itself. Death is coming to you.
So let me try to draw a parallel. It's going to be a little bit elaborate, but let me go ahead and do that because I want to compare this to Genesis and the Garden of Eden. So inside the Garden of Eden, there is eternal life because man is with God. He's with God. God is right there. The eternal principle is right there. Both Adam and Eve have complete trust in God. They are focused on God. They are listening to what acting according to God. And that is what eternal life. Remember that God forbids them from eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but does not forbid them from eating the fruit of the tree of eternal life, because they are actually living the eternal life. Again, using Aquinas terms of eternal life is life according to the eternal principle. So when you're acting, you're standing in the center, you are with the center, you are focused on the center, you are focused on the center and acting from the center. That is eternal life, according to Aquinas. Now, when he says that if you eat this fruit, you will surely die, what is he saying? Is that he's saying that you are not, fruit is the result of a tree. Adam does not yet have the ability of actually producing, kind of tending to the tree, growing the tree. So if you take the fruit that is in the periphery, that is the result of life, and eat that and enjoy that and get attached to that, then you will surely die. Now, of course, the devil comes and says, you're not going to die. Did he say you would die? No, you're not going to die. But if you look at the word die in that context, it's the same meaning. You're saying you're no longer going to be living according to the eternal principle. So you would lose that. You're going to lose that. And that, by being focused on the fruits instead of virtue that produces the fruit, by being attached to the peripheral, that is death. Again and again in the Gospel of John, we saw that whenever John is talking about life, he means spiritual life. He means life according to the eternal principle, that living water. It's so I see that as being analogous to what you're saying. What do you think?
Eternal life and living according to the eternal principle is life. Yes, that I see as it's the same concept here, because when you're not living according to eternal principles, then you're dying. That's like, it's not that you're going to die, but in the process you're dying itself.
Yeah. Wonderful. And it appears again in the chapter 4 with the woman from Samaria, where she's interpreting everything that, Jesus is talking about living water, which is about the spiritual life. And she's interpreting it as physical and going back and forth. Okay, thank you. Folks, please go ahead and type exclamation mark to talk about what you got from this chapter. If you have any comments, let's do that. Last chance. Otherwise, we're going to go to chapter 14. Does anybody have any comments or any questions on this topic? Joe, go ahead.
Wait a minute. So is it on this topic or just the chapter?
No, the entire chapter 13.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of scrambling for my notes last week, but I think that this this is the deepest chapter in the Gita, as you mentioned, because it's the basis of like kind of how to be, it kind of gets to the idea of being self-aware. And, it's the metaphysics and understanding how we're separate from nature itself, but also but we're not separate from God. And so this is like kind of the metaphysics that underpins understanding the relationship of seeing the God in everyone, and how our sensory experiences and how we interact with the physical world, they're all covered in this chapter. So and I'm trying to think really quickly.
That was wonderfully put, Joe.
Yeah, it's it was very deep, and you kind of, and I've thought about this a lot, because then you start to see how Aristotle and Plato, like it kind of started to make a little bit more sense to me, like how it means to be fully integrated and what it means to transcend your own reality, like or transcend
Absolutely. And this is very much Aristotelian, as best I can see, because what it is that what it is saying is that the forms are forms of the function, and function really manifests itself through the forms. So it is kind of, function is formulating, forms are functioning. So it's like it's just one thing. It is one thing looked at from two different perspectives, one from what is driving it, and one from the perspective of what are the results of it. But it's just one thing. So it's very much Aristotelian. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, there was something that Yogeshwar said last week in response to one of my comments. Was he said, you mentioned that if you read the commentary or people's perspectives on this particular chapter, you start to understand what their philosophy is and what their metaphysics are, like, and what their philosophies are when it comes to how they see the Gita. So yeah, I mean, this seems to me to be Aristotelian, but some people may like take it and make it something different.
No, people can always make anything out of anything. So
okay,
don't worry about that.
okay.
Because you have to make a judgment yourself of what it is. And folks, I would really like to know what you got from this chapter. What do you think this chapter is doing? What do you understand from it? Marco, go ahead.
Sorry, actually, this was a question.
No, go ahead. Questions are fine too. Go ahead.
Actually, so the thing, it was said, like, to understand the center, like you have to see, you have to know the thing that's running through, the constant that's running in the periphery. And I didn't understand like what that constant is.
Thank you. Yogeshwar, go ahead.
Yes, so it is like looking at each and every wave, yeah, and seeing that the quality of water is in there, like water is in there in each and every wave. Looking at a wave that is long and short, you may see the differences in the waves, and that's what we normally do. In the outside world, let's say, we look at each and every body with a difference. Like this person has these qualities and this person has these qualities. So we're looking at the qualities that they project onto the world. Now, it's like looking at the waves. Now, what is being said here is look at the water in the waves. And that is a constant between however big the wave may be or however small the wave may be, water is in there. In the same way, look at everything in this world and you'll see the life force within each and every. nobody who doesn't have life, like that ultimate truth in there is there, like the life force is in there, what Aquinas calls the fountain of water. It's there eternally, and that's what you have to look at, not only the outside that is projected to your eyes, what you can feel with your senses, not only that, but something that you can see that this is a constant, the eternal life is there.
Thank you, Yogeshwar. So Marco, I will add, you can look at it from just the science perspective. And you can see an analogous point to this. Now, I want to stress that this is only analogous things, and analogous things are not, it gives you, analogy just points in a general direction. It doesn't capture everything. There is a lot more to this concept in Gita than what I'm about to say about the universal principles. So, but it's analogous. So when a scientist is trying to say that if you want to understand things, you have to understand the universal principles that are shaping them. It's an analogous statement. You're saying what universal principle is behind everything that you see. Now, you can say, okay, I can see this bottle. Okay, I can see this bottle. And I can say what happens to it. Okay. And I can see this pen and see how it works. But a scientist will say, if you understand the universal principles that are shaping all of that, that is the center. If you understand the laws of motion, then you really understand what the motion of various things is. There's all kinds of motion happening around you. That is in the periphery. When you work to understand the universal laws of motion that are behind everything, you firstly understand that those are constant, those are eternal. Whereas motions that you're seeing keep changing. Secondly, if you are understanding motion, any particular thing, from the perspective of universal laws, you actually understand it. You, instead of just reacting to it, otherwise you will react to it. Whereas if you're coming from the center, then you understand it. So that is the kind of relationship. There is more to this concept in Gita. One of the things which is more than this is that it has to do with consciousness. It has to do with you being conscious of these universal principles and actually see the universal principles, the means through which you are seeing them operative, and the thing itself, and consciousness of all of this and acceptance of all of this as just one thing. So there is many different layers here, but that's the general direction. All right, if there are no more comments, we can start with chapter 14. David, is that okay, Yogeshwar? Yeah, okay. David, could you go ahead and read chapter 14 from 1 to 8? This is the introduction to Prakriti. You know what?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Can you, Yogeshwar, can you one more time clarify the knower and the known, the relationship? The way I understood was, if you know it, you are not a knower. Can you explain that a little bit more, please?
Okay. So we normally use knower, known, and knowledge, but we'll also like to put it like this as well. Look at it as the seer the seen and sight in between. Yes, this is another example of the same thing. So you are the seer, not through the eyes only, but look at each and every thought that comes up in your mind. Like you can see it. And if you can see each and every thought that comes into your mind, then the thought will be the seen in this context. Because we take it too far into the peripheral and give some examples of the peripheral, it may feel like the thoughts themselves are the seer, or the thoughts themselves are the knowledge itself. No, but when you take it inside now, like take it subtle, the thoughts themselves as they arise and they deform and arise again, and then they fade back away, all that is the seen in there. Like you can see the thought arising, you can see the thought staying, and you can see the thought going back into nothing. You can also see the nothing that is there. Now there is the sight, which is even subtler than that. There's like always, like for example, that sight or the knowledge will always be something that you cannot think about. It's something that is there, but it's almost not there. It's like the space in between the seen and the seer. When you realize that even the thoughts are being seen as they arise and as they go back into nothing, then you'll realize certainly, because there will be a vacuum created there in your consciousness, so that it will move back and it will see that there is something separate from the thoughts. And that separateness is subtle. When you separate like that, what happens is you're able to see each and every thought, that's fine. And then you'll also realize that the one who is seeing is really there. You'll never be able to see the seer per se, and that will never happen. What happens is maybe sometimes you'll be able to see the reflection of the seer within the thoughts. That's fine, but that's also not the seer. The seer is constantly only seeing, can never be seen. And the seer is always just untouched by everything that is seen. Does that answer your question?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. I mean, this is, in some ways, it is almost impossible to talk about, because ultimately it is the experience. You know, you have to, it is, all of these words are trying to help you point to an experience of consciousness. It's like a experience of what does it mean to be conscious? You know, who is seeing? It's like you're asking, who is seeing? Who is seeing? And you will see all kinds of false things. And they say, no. I thought that was what I was seeing. That was what was seeing. But no, you kind of relentlessly have to go and use these questions as ways of directing your attention to the experience of consciousness itself. I don't know, Yogeshwar, does that make any sense? What do you think?
So there is a practice that is normally done of consciousness. If you want to pull back and see the seer, and not see the seer, but know, like experience the seer, because it can't be seen. The practice is normally look at like take in sound from outside, or take in something from outside from any sense, let's say, whether it's sight or it's touch or it's sound, whatever. Only one at a time. So like for a space in time, like for example, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, only take in sound, for example. When you take in the sound, you realize that The sound is coming. Yes, the sound is there. There may be something that contemplates upon the sound, like what type of sound is it and what is it. So for now, let it be the middle, for now. And then you also realize that the one who is listening is there. Like there's one who is listening, untouched, not even thinking about anything, but there's that listening that is happening to the sound. You practice it over a time, maybe 3 months or so. Then you come subtler, like you come inside. Each and every, like now not going onto the sense object, you come onto your own senses, like the ear itself or the eye itself. This is like coming backwards. When you look at the eye or the ear, like when you feel it, yes, it's there. Now you'll feel sounds coming in. Don't focus on the sounds, focus on the ear and what is happening there. When you focus on what is happening there, you'll realize that this is not also the middle. Remember, we had said that let this be the middle for now. So what you realize that this is also part of the peripheral, not the middle. And then there is also he who is seeing still. Just allow that who is seeing to be, or that who is listening to be. Don't touch it. Then you come subtler within, like you come, like you push yourself back and you come to your thoughts now. And thoughts are mostly of two types. One is sound and another is sight. For example, you may have thoughts which are of like words in nature. And you may have thoughts which are sight in nature, like they have pictures in it. So those are the most prominent two types of thought that we normally have. So pick one of them. If you pick sound, for example, words within your mind, you'll also realize that words, like when you focus on the words, you'll realize that that's not also the middle. Neither is it the seer. It is the seen. It is that which is being heard. When you get there, that it is being heard, and this will be like 9 months into the practice. When you see that that's being heard, you'll realize that the middle is something different. Not even the thoughts that you have is the middle. Middle is something different, which is more subtle than the thoughts. So when you realize that the middle is something different, then the seer is even different from the middle now. He's more inside. So it's like you're constantly, there is this, what do you call, this object that we have, this closed container that we have, that we're having our experience within. When you pull back, you're creating a vacuum within. And as you create a vacuum, you realize that all the air is being sucked out. When all the air is sucked out, there's something that is there in the vacuum. That's something there in the vacuum as you're pulling back constantly. What I mean by pulling back is going from the sound that is coming from outside to the ear, to the thought of the words. As you're pulling back, you're creating the vacuum. And that vacuum, certainly, what it brings about is you realize what consciousness is. You experience consciousness. And that doesn't come like one time at a go. It comes slowly by slowly. Because you'll realize something at the time when you're listening for outside sounds. You'll realize something as you're listening to your thoughts as well. When you're listening to your thoughts there, what will happen is he who is untouched by the thoughts will be. Whatever the thoughts are saying, whether they're coming or they're going, whatever is happening to them will happen, untouched and unstaining the seer. When that happens, you realize that consciousness is there, the interaction is there, and the arising and demolishing of the thoughts is also there. That's fine. But all the three are different. Qualitatively, they are different. And they also have that space in between. So the space in between is the interaction. And the greater the space you can make, the easier you can see the thoughts. You know, it's really hard to see something that's really near your eyes. You may not even really see a stain within your specs. It's hard to see the stain within your specs because they're really near the eye. When you move the specs a bit farther away, then you can see, oh yeah, there's a stain within my glasses. There's a stain within my spectacles. Yeah. There you can see that, yes, when the thoughts move a bit further away, then you can see, yes, there's a space in between, and you can see all the thoughts that arise. And you can see that I am separate from them. The same practice can be done with sight, because you also have thoughts that are made of sight, like they're made of pictures within. But what happens is, if you always do one and then the other day, you'll not have a constant. So do one for about a year, and then you'll realize that that difference is there. When that difference there arises, then you're no longer within that. You're no longer within the Prakriti. You're no longer within the thoughts. You're no longer taken away by the thoughts or by the moods that are created by the thoughts. You are there. The thoughts are there, separate from you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. So folks, I want to point out one thing, that the Indian culture has focused on consciousness, and it has very deep ideas, deep practices, deep schools about this. So it is very advanced. You know, what Yogeshwar just explained, I mean, is an example of how much depth there is to this. The best book that I know to kind of get started is Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. That does a very good job of getting you started there, but it's a universe into itself. I think Gita touches upon this, but Gita is dealing with it mostly at a philosophical level. There is this entire range of practices that are there in the Indian culture about this. And I think if you are interested in it, I think Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is something that I would look at. What do you think, Yogeshwar? What would you say is a good place if somebody wanted to get a flavor of how much is there? Where would they start?
Yes, if you want to know more about philosophy of India, then go to Vedanta and Sankhya. Then if you want to know about the practices that are going on, then you go to yoga and bhakti. So this is like a distinction between all the schools that are there. It's not that they don't accept each other's, but what happens is, when you know who you are, you know your swabhava, where you can go to the ultimate, the way you can go to the ultimate is one way. You can't go through all the four ways at once. There's one thing you have to choose. When you get to that one thing you have to choose, then you can even make it better through your experience, you know, trying out something and then seeing, does it match with my experience? And then making it better, even making that, making the tool better as well. Because even after the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, there's so many others who talk about the asanas in variety. And then they'll come to pranayama and they'll say there's a variety in pranayama. Like they're making it finer and better, and then they're getting the best out of it always. So even in like Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, it will give you a flavor, yes, but then if you go deep into yoga again,
Yes.
then it will be like each and every asana, it has its own way. Each and every pranayama, it has its own way. Then the different types of concentration, whether it's concentration out, using all the five senses, that is like there will be trataka, which is concentration using your eyes when they open. There is like just listening to what nature has to give you. That's like using your ears. Then each and every of the five senses. Then you also go concentration, closing your eyes and all the five senses and inside, like what is happening to your thoughts. And then there's also concentration without thoughts. You just concentrate on one. Even like you'll have only one picture within, not a picture outside, but one picture within. No thoughts coming or going, just the picture within in front of your consciousness. That's also concentration. So different types of concentration in dhyana and dharana. So that first variety is like, it's colorful there when you go inside.
Wonderful.
So
Beautiful.
just
Good.
to have a feel, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are yes. But then if you want to know the colorfulness of everything, then you have to delve deeper within. So that's only yoga now. Just look about Sankhya, how much does it have? Then look at bhakti, how much each and every part of it may be subtle in its practices, each and every. And then Vedanta on its own.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. Beautifully put. Thank you. Brian.
I appreciated Jody's question. I had the same question, a little different, and but I really appreciated Yogeshwar's answer. It triggered a thought that you're using analogies and metaphors to try to open our eyes. That's how I perceive this, and or understand it. So the other metaphor that hit me when you say, well, it's knowing, or you said, yes, you can think about it as knowing, and then you explained that, or you could think about it as seeing, that you did in response to her question. And then it struck me, well, you could think about it as feeling, like emotional feelings. And that really hit me as being able to sense the separation between the feeling and the feeler. Because maybe it's my background or the Western background. I do not see my feelings as being myself. And the other thing is that if I look at the same thing or think about the same thing, I will usually have the same thought or sight. But if I think about the same thing or I see the same thing, sometimes I'll have different feelings about it each time I think or think about it or see it. And that the changes in feeling make me more aware of the constancy of the person who is, let's say, aware of I don't know if it's the person, but of the thing, the entity that is aware of the feeling. When I have different feelings about the same thing at different points in time, that makes me more aware of what I think you're pointing at. I don't know if you have a reaction to that, but it just seemed so much in line with what you were saying.
Yogeshwar, would you like to comment on that?
Yes. So, yes, you can do that in any perspective. So even emotions, fine, because you'll have a feeler, you'll have the feeling, and you'll have what is felt, which will be the emotion. And that three-type distinction can be made in any perspective. Any perspective. Let it be using any of your five senses, or any of your, like maybe mind, which is your thoughts, or intellect, which are concepts, or emotions, which are also part of you. So any of them. And even there are also those that make dreams as as part of this, like They put the dream on the other side and then become the dreamer and have themselves separate. There are also other practices that put, like one is dreaming, emotions, and then there are also other practices that put their concepts in front. Like all these concepts are there. And then they are the ones who are seeing the concepts. All of the concepts are just there. And without them interacting with the concepts, concepts will not have any movement within themselves. That is also a practice on its own. So anything, any faculty that you can go with, it's fine. But making this distinction of the three is important.
Thank you. I
Just
just
for your
wanted to,
information, I have done that with, I feel like what you've described, I've done that with dreams as well.
thank you. So one thing I wanted to add is the importance of practice in all of this. You know, you can read things and they're trying to point you to something. But ultimately, this is all about practice. This is actually experiencing it, seeing it in real time, and being able to act, being able to live like this is what it is all about. So practice is a crucial part of it. And it's all about developing increased self-awareness, and you're different than anybody else. So you kind of have to work with yourself to choose the paths that you have and have build the practice. So do want to emphasize the importance of practice in all of this. Jyoti.
Yeah, I was also interested in knowing about the mask that you had said, Yogeshwar, that people wear when they want to, they're not upfront with their feelings. And you said those wearing the mask are not a good idea. They are dangerous because in the end, they keep you from learning about the truth about your own self. Can you explain a little bit why would that be if you are holding on to your own emotions and you're not revealing them to the world outside? Can you explain a little bit, please?
So the masks that we wear are part of something called dambha in Sanskrit, or in Hindi also it's there. So dambha means having something else on the inside and showing something else on the outside. In that way, what happens is we normally want to have a mask that is in fit with society. What we normally do then, like for example, we're in the office or we're at work, what we shall do there is we want to be the strongest of all, like we want to show our strength. What we'll do in that situation, even though some bad situation comes out, it's good to be strong. I'm not saying don't be strong. That's a quality of dheeraj. But being strong, it should come from inside. What happens is when we're in such a situation, we show that we are strong, but from inside we're scared. And what happens there is when you're showing strength only to show others, when you're having strength only to show others, we will pass through life as it is, life as we know from the outside. But it will make ours, like from the inside, we shall become empty because we don't have the qualities that are needed. However, we're replacing them with shows, like we're replacing them with masks on top. On the alternative, what should happen is know who you are and know that you have to cultivate strength from the inside rather than having a one-time stop with it. What you should do is, rather than thinking of the short term, Like, let me put on a mask and then it will help me for now. Think about the long term. Think about integrating strength within yourself from the inside. I should be strong enough to face this situation from the inside, not just wearing a mask. So what happens with wearing a mask is you feel that you can get through life, but at the end, you're sorrowful and from the inside, you're empty. On the other hand, what you could do is know that you are vulnerable and then build yourself up from the beginning. Not only using masks, don't use the masks or don't only use protections from the outside. Build your strength from inside. And when you know you're vulnerable is when you can build the strength from outside, from inside, rather. But when you think that, oh yes, I can get through situations using short-time tools, then you'll also forego the long-term possibility of building the strength from inside.
Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. So what I would say is that the ideal that Gita puts on the table is the idea of sthita prajna, of saying that, the core of you is stable. And if you develop that, then you are able to deal with everything that is going on. Masks are actually trying to do a particular block of a particular emotion. Idea of sthita prajna is all about accepting everything that is going on and realizing that there is something in you which is stable and untouchable at the core of your being, which is the same as Purusha, and that's kind of living from there. And that strength is a strength of a very different kind than protection you can get from a particular situation. It's accepting, it's a deep acceptance of Prakriti, of all the changes that are taking place, and keeping your attention focused on that which is constant throughout. Thank you. Let's do one thing, Yogeshwar. We don't have time to start a new chapter. So let's look at Gita as a whole. So we have finished 13 chapters. How do you think of Gita? It's like you divide it into 2 parts or 3 parts. Can you talk a little bit about that and where we are?
Yes. So however you can divide it, because it's divided into 18 for us, then our minds will try to contextualize that this is one part and this is another part. So you can do 2 parts. That's also fine, because at 9, then Krishna is taking him to the peak at 9. So from the first, the first is Vishada Yoga. Then Krishna pulls him up from the 2nd chapter. Up to the 9th chapter, Krishna is constantly pulling him uphill, to say. Then you can see that at chapter 10 and 11, Krishna has shown him what the world looks like from the peak of the mountain at that time. Now, what Krishna is now doing in the other half of the whole of Gita is, yes, you've seen the world from the peak. Now you're not going to go, now I don't have to pull you up now. Yes? But now you should know how to stay within the world. Not only looking at the world from the perspective of Brahman, but also knowing the world as it is, and then getting your hands dirty as well. don't only, oh, now I know Brahman, I don't want to interact with the world now. So Krishna is going to talk about the gunas. So in 13, Krishna has talked about how it is separate. And in 14, because now it's Vibhaga Yoga, all of them are Vibhaga. 13 is Kshetragya Vibhaga, 14 is going to be Gunatraya Vibhaga. So all these are Vibhaga, like they're separating. Vibhaga means separating. So you're separating everything so that you know that when I'm getting my hands dirty in the world, I am not getting dirty. I am staying stainless. This is now how Krishna is going to do it now. Because, normally how we feel like when somebody is taking us uphill, we feel that we never have to deal with whatever is down the mountain now. We'll never have to look at it again. But the truth is, go uphill, like look at the whole world from the peak of the mountain, and then also have the guts to come back to the world, stay on this world, stay in this world, and do all the actions as they're supposed to be, yet remain at the peak of the mountain. So those are the two distinctions that you can make. Then if you're dividing them into three, you can have this distinction of one is Vishada. So from 2 to 6, like you can say 1 to 6, it is all about Sankhya and Yoga. It's all about Jnana and Karma. And it's talking about that mix and match of both of them. How both of them should be integrated within each other, how they're separate as well, and how they're integrated as well. How you cannot do one without the other. And how you have to choose your way from both of them as well. Then from 7 to 12, taking it as one, there are two concepts which are really shown in, like you could say chapter 12 is the conclusion of 7 to 12, whereby both concepts are shown. One is avyakta, another one is vyakta. One is about bhakti, another one is about Vedanta. So the same way Krishna had questions about jnana and karma from chapter 2 to 6, the same way he has a question about vyakta and avyakta. What should I do? Should I do bhakti or should I do Vedanta? That's the question in chapter 12. And you can see from 7 to 12, the two main concepts that are talked about are bhakti and Vedanta. Vedanta meaning everything about the world, like everything about Brahman and everything about the world, whereby in chapter 7, Prakriti is being talked about and Brahman is being talked about. Then in chapter 8, Adhiyagya, karma is being talked about. That's all part of Vedanta, like know it, know what is happening by its root. Then you go on to chapter 10 and 11, whereby chapter 10 is certainly talking about how even Prakriti, even though it's different and Brahma is different, still Brahma is the one who is showing himself through Prakriti. Not two distinct things, but one now. So also have that perspective. Then in 12, in 11, the whole view is shown, how everything should be known. And in 12, again, Arjuna has the question between Vyakta and Avyakta, Bhakti and Vedanta. What should be done? What path should I choose now? So that is 7 to 12. Then from 13 to 18, look at the names of all the chapters. It has Vibhaga within itself. And I'm very well aware of chapter 15, which is Purushottam Yoga, but all the others, just because we want to make a concept out of it. Put the 6 together. Look at their names. They all have Vibhaga within them. Like it means you're separating something from the other. You're saying Kshetra is different from Kshetragya. You're saying each and every guna has their own different qualities. So it's knowing the nitty-gritties of Prakriti, knowing each and every nitty-gritty of the world. In that way, what you're able to do here is discriminate each and everything. And you see how Krishna does it. It's not like only looking at the totality of it and leaving it at that, but knowing each and every difference, yet knowing what is the same within each and everything. Until you know the subtle differences, you never know the oneness within everything. And he's showing the subtle differences. And 16 is Devasura Sampad Vibhaga Yoga. Then 18 is Moksha Sannyasa Vibhaga Yoga. All that. Like all the vibhagas, all the separations are done here. Once the separations are done, you know the separations and you know the unity within it. Normally, we want to run on one side. If we want to take the separations, we say everything is separate. There's no unity. And when we talk about unity, we're only talking about unity. There's no separation between them. But Krishna talks about both of them. You have to look at the knower, the known, and the knowledge, and make them separate first. And then you know the unity between them.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. That was a great, great overview of the structure. Really, really appreciate that. So folks, we are going to start with chapter 14. The chapter 14, Yogeshwar has divided into 3 parts. The first part is from 1 to 8. So we're going to start that on Thursday. 1 to 8 is introduction to Prakriti. 9 to 20 is Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas gunas. And 21 to 27 is how to be free from gunas. So we're going to do it in 3 parts. We will cover them between either in 2 meetups or 3 meetups. So thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate everybody's comments and questions and feedback. And thank you very much, Yogeshwar. This is turning out to be better and better with every meetup. So thank you. See you, folks. I want to tell you that on Sunday, Yasuhiko Kimura is going to be back, and he's going to be talking about new spirituality for the future. The theme this Sunday is going to be new philosophy, new cosmology, and new ethics. What ethics? What can we learn from all the ethics that all of these great works have produced through the ages? And how do we apply it to modern times? That's what he's going to be talking about. That's going to be at 11 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday. Hope you can make it. Bye, everybody. Good night.